This is the Conscious Planet Network with your host, myself, Gaianna Sophia. In these episodes, we'll be diving into inspirational stories of change, new technologies, and people really making a difference, including interviews from authors, entrepreneurs, spiritual leaders, journalists, great thinkers, physicists, alternative healers, and so much more. There is just so much going on the planet right now that is helping to change humanity, our planet, and the future, and we need to know about it. A big part of this is showcasing people who've stepped up and aligned with their life purposes, recognizing that the more we attune to our destinies, why we're here, the more we help expand and evolve our collective future. At the beginning of each show, I'll be sharing stories and tips on how to align your life to a higher purpose of being here, to deepen into your destiny, using my life and what I'm going through as an example. The Conscious Planet Network is an exploration of the evolution that is already in progress, one that you and I are a part of, that's happening on an individual and global level. There are so many people right now who are contributing to changing the tides of our future. Are you ready to be inspired? This is Gaianna. I'm so excited to be here with you today. And before we get to the interview, I wanted to just touch on how our lives can be like treasure hunts. When we step into the mode of really accessing our abilities for tuning into the laws of attraction, being able to work with that, being able to clear down things that are keeping us from stepping into the lives that we want, it can become like a treasure hunt. This is the ultimate goal. Because the treasure hunt is the energy. When you think of it, when you think, oh, I'm going to go on a treasure hunt, that's the level of excitement we want for your lives. This is the level of excitement that attunes you to your genius. Part of realizing that we're manifestors is to be able to recognize it in our lives when it happens. Because when we become more conscious of it and the process of it, it can get very exciting. I'm going to give you an example. I had an experience this week of going with a friend for a walk through a golf course. And it was too damp for golfers to be out. The season hadn't started yet. And as I was walking through the course, I started feeling like, oh, golf would kind of be fun. Like, I've always been like, oh, those crazy golfers, they're so normal. Or, it's like, it's not very sporty, is it? They're not running or anything. So I had all these judgments about it. But as I was walking the field, I really felt like this really kind of like awe, this sense of like oneness, even a connectedness to nature. And so I just thought, oh, that would be awesome. And about 5 days after that, a friend of mine had we're doing the course down. We're going to do the sacred site tour together down in Sedona, and she was talking about her partner and how his offering might be a golf trip for the fellows. And then the next day after that, a pro golfer offered me a complimentary game, like for me to learn how to play golf, and I'd never done it before. And I was telling a girlfriend about this, and she was like, "You're such a powerful manifestor, and sometimes you just don't realize it." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's true. I had the intention." And then it started seeping in. Golf started seeping in until there was someone who offered me a complimentary golf session. And so, this is not pure coincidence at all. Golf doesn't show up in my life. It's never really been a thing. But it was a curiosity for me, and it started to attract. It started to attract in from like different areas. And so until it came to the point where I'm actually going to be on the golf course, something that I hadn't really foreseen happening 2 weeks ago. So the more we become conscious of the process of calling in what we want and recognizing it when it shows up, then we can start to get more of a handle on working with it. As long as we remain unconscious to the process, we remain what feels like a victim to a circumstance. And in a large part, we kind of are. But we are still manifesting regardless. We are still calling in things. It's what we put our attention on that will become stronger and stronger in our realities. So we start at one point, start to have to start questioning for ourselves, well, what do we really want? We may know what we don't want, but that's something we don't want to put our attention on. It's good to be clear and decisive, but what we do want to put our attention on is what we do want. And the laws that work in this universe is you feel it first. You feel what you want first. It's an energetic resonance universe. And so when we act as if we've already got it, then it starts to become more in our field. So just a reminder that I'm doing a sacred site tour coming up in mid-May, and it's going to be down in Sedona, Arizona. And if you are interested, you can go to my website, which is at the end of this show, and contact me and let me know to put you on the list. Okay, so it's time to go on to our show. If you can, I would recommend sitting in your garden to listen to this episode. As Reed articulates our connection to the planet, you'll get to experience a visceral awareness of what he's talking about. It's really cool. So today is episode 3, and we have Reed Richard, who is a poet, or the closest thing they can identify him as is a poet, an author, a conductor of Orchestra-Farms, and a father of one. Welcome, Reed.
Thank you so much, Gaianna. It's wonderful to be here with you today.
Well, awesome. First of all, I want to say that I've run into Reed many times on the island here, and this last time was the most funnest because we were at a mutual friend of ours, Bradley Morse's house, and he was having a party, and they were filming this party because it was for a course they were doing. And Reed and I and another fellow were in the background of the filming. We were just actually behind the filming, and we were having a pillow fight.
It was the most fun. Oh my gosh.
It was so fun. And it was so fun because, like when people are doing something, serious, and then you're like in the background, you're like the kids in the back of the class.
Absolutely.
And you're just goofing off.
It's the best.
It was totally the best.
I haven't been to a pretend party like that before, and I'm like, we should do more pretend parties.
I think so.
And even have someone filming it. That way they can have their serious moments, so the rest of us can be that much more goofy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I took on no roles other than, extra. I'm
Brilliant.
the extra. So, Reed, wow, you're up to so much. I'd love to start off with just sharing about the things that you're doing now and how you got there. So you have this book that you've come into. You also have a medicinal food forest, and you're also doing classes called Embrace Your Ecology, which I find fascinating. So can you tell us how this all happened for you?
Sure. The food forest is in the making, so it doesn't look like much right now. Everything is very small and tiny, and it's one of the brilliant things of going through life is that you're planting all these seeds, and you put them in the ground, and you can imagine them as their fully grown, mature brilliance. But for the first 10 plus years, they look like this little pipsqueak thing that doesn't amount to much. And when I came to Salt Spring about 3 years ago now, I had in mind that I really wanted to engage with nature more, which had already been a pretty prevalent part of my life. And through the work that I was doing, I met a couple people, and they had some land that they wanted farmed. And so as I was out there engaging with the land, I realized this is too big for me just to take on. And so this year we're extending it out to other people. And in that extension, the question becomes, how are you organizing it? And I looked around. I didn't really like any of the models I saw for farming, and I decided I want to basically have a villageless village. And as part of this villageless village, I want to really acknowledge the different members of it. And those members include, like, as a megafauna, which is a human form, or any of the other big beasts that we see moving
I love
around.
that. Megafauna.
Megafauna.
Fauna.
Yeah.
Megafauna.
Like the trees are megaflora.
Indeed.
And to recognize that we have so many organisms that keep us alive, that are vital to our well-being. And largely they go unnoticed. Similar to our breath, most people are just breathing with the top third of their lungs instead of taking beautiful, nice, full breaths. And each of these different organisms are breathing. And so when I was inviting people in, I was inviting them in with the awareness that you are a resplendent ecosystem unto yourself, only that you are enmeshed in all of these other, what do they call it when circles overlap? But you guys get the idea? When the overlapping circles, and you're like, hey, here's the spot where they're all overlapped with each other. And in the awareness that there are these tiny organisms that are providing the life juice to all of the things that we intake, can allow us to have the recognition, the awareness, and appreciation for what's really here.
So this is what you were introducing to people who were going to potentially come and work on your property. You were saying to them, we can, this is a whole nother aspect as well. Let's embrace this.
Absolutely. And letting them know, when you come here as a family, we're going to kind of enjoy ourselves but get to work and make sure that there's still lots of produce coming out of it and that the berries are going in and all of these things. And I let them know that once a month I'm going to do essentially a small class called Embrace Your Ecology, where it will allow us to go into more of a meditative practice, acknowledging each of these different levels of life that we inhabit, and at the particular place of the farm to acknowledge the organisms of the soil. So when we pick up a handful of soil, we don't just see a bunch of beautiful dirt there, but we recognize that there's more life in that handful of soil than there are people on the planet. And as we're walking across it, just like I wouldn't walk across a person without saying, oh, are you okay? To ask those organisms, like, hey, I recognize that you're here. May I please walk across you?
I friggin' love how connected that is.
And when we go up to like a plant, for instance, a kale plant, before I pull off the leaf, have a moment with the plant and see if you can receive some information from it and ask it permission before we pluck its leaf. There's a lot of practices in different hunting and gathering cultures where they'll have a prayer before they go on a hunt. And when they finally track the animal down, they'll have a prayer before or right after they kill it and really honor the different life forms. And I find that in our fast-paced society, the amount of appreciation that we have for the things that we interact with tends to be rather limited, even in the people who are having gratitude practices. It's just like, we're coming into a nice dry summer again. I use that nice term loosely. And having the gratitude for the water. Like every time it rains, I'm just so thankful that the earth replenishes that system. And constantly asking, like, how do I keep my own personal system hydrated? Because a landscape that's hydrated isn't going to burn up when the fire season kicks in, which tends to be a more frequent thing now in our earth cycles. And just to remember, like, all of these different parts of ourselves want the breath. They want a nice full breath to come in right down to the tips of your toes. The ground wants beautiful replenished hydration happening on it. Not necessarily too soggy, but to bring our mindfulness like, oh, all of these things matter. And even for my own personal health, the health of the soil is essential. The plants that I'm eating aren't going to be healthy if the soil isn't healthy. And we have our own body soil in our digestive tract, which is basically the outside world somehow inside of ourselves, as we're a nice long tube. And by eating those fresh foods, we're getting all of those wonderful enzymes and other things that I don't know their names of to go into us that allow us to be more of the place that we're at, rather than, say, a highly processed food, which is going to be more devoid of the living organisms that compose us.
I knew there was a reason why I invited you onto this show. I love that. I love your perspective. I love that you are empowering people to witness the earth from their own personal experience of body awareness. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel like it's tangible and it's attainable, and it is a beautiful practice to really attune with the earth. Could you tell us, were you always like this? Is this something that you've always been into, or is this something where you had a journey involved. Were there challenges, to actually have this blossom in your life?
When I was first born, the place that I lived had no houses near it for a mile. And there was a lot of different wild foods around. There was wild strawberries, raspberries, blackberries, asparagus. And I have a visceral memory of going over to the asparagus patch and pulling off a piece and biting into it. And when I first went to Hawaii, as soon as I got off the plane, I just felt these kundalini rushes moving through my body. And that's the closest sensation that I can bring that memory to say that that's what that was like. And I knew at that moment, like, this is the most important thing to be eating and putting into myself. And every time I found those berries, I was just like, this is the most nourishing thing I have in my life. And as my life continued, I kind of knew that there was something off in the world, and I couldn't put my finger on it because I was, an infant to a young boy.
I think like the rest of us, we're all like, what is going on here?
Totally.
Yeah. Cool.
And so I, after college and after going to like massage and becoming a Reiki master teacher and doing some sound, color, and chi movement healing practices, decided that nature was the teacher I needed to go to next. And so I would go out into the woods. And I spent basically 5 years kind of circling the United States and parts of Canada. And I was constantly shaking off culture. I just recognized that there was something innately wrong with the ecocidal Western culture. And I knew that if I was going to succeed at living my life and feeling in alignment with my morals and my ethics, that I would have to really shed the belief structures that had clung onto my system.
Was there anything in particular that you were noticing you were shedding?
My care for relating to people. Like, there's a sense when you go into a public place that you're going to talk to people, and maybe you'll talk about the weather because everyone notices the weather. A lot of people notice sports or politics. And to go in there, I think the weather's still important to notice, and I definitely do.
Sure.
Whereas like sports and politics, I would look at people with a blank stare like, what are you talking about? I have no clue what you're even considering here. Whereas when someone would talk about some of the effects that are happening in the world, such as, plastics in the ocean or whatever, I would engage in those conversations because I felt like, oh, there's something fruitful here. We're noticing the interactions of things. And a good friend of mine had this wonderful conversation where he expressed the point of view that because humans are part of nature, everything that we do is a part of nature. So plastics, because they're composed of things from nature, are actually a part of nature. And we don't really know what the Earth's plan is for things. So maybe the Earth put us here just to make plastics so that a new evolution could take place on the planet. At a certain time, there wasn't oxygen here until cyanobacteria came onto the scene and put so much oxygen into the environment that it literally caused an extinction event. And then plants came, or animals started coming into the picture after that. Because there wasn't enough oxygen before the cyanobacteria for...
So maybe our environment, or maybe the Earth wants like a up with the estrogen levels.
Totally.
In order to bring something about.
Yeah. I mean, I think that we could use some more of that nourishing feminineness around, for sure.
Perhaps. Maybe it is an effect. Wouldn't that be just putting on this, kind of comic, divine comedy perspective for a moment? Wouldn't that be interesting if that's what this is actually about? It's like bringing in more estrogen because it's been so, testosterone for so long.
Absolutely.
That's funny. Okay. Yeah. That's awesome.
Totally. And there's all these ways that we can kind of flip the scripts on how we think of like what's happening in the world in those ways. And just to be like, yeah, it's not, the Earth has never been stable in its climate and in its environments. It's always shifting and changing. And even if we are responsible for this current phase of it, evidently that's what the Earth wants. Otherwise, the Earth would have shed us a while ago, is my kind of take on it, because it tends to do that and goes through these major ecological changes. And we just are living through this fascinating moment where it's happening right now.
Yeah, well, I think that's definitely, you've hit on something major, which is that we do think of our environment, we think of our lives as stable, and sometimes we actually just go for stable. Of, so when we have conflicting and contradictory thoughts of like, oh, well, suddenly there's an island of plastic out there.
Right.
What's that going to do to us? Or, the carbon levels are so high.
Crazy.
So it kind of starts to shake and shatter our stability. But the actual root of the root of the situation is that everything is moving and shifting, and the stability that we're trying to attain is actually moving and shifting all the time. And so one way that I found around that, which I thought was really interesting, was connecting to source rather than connecting to things outside of myself for stability. Certainly. Because that's the only constant, is my relationship with spirit. And so, like, what do you think about that? How do you feel about stability? Like, where do you get where do you find the best way to get stability is?
I feel it's quite similar to you, in that, like, on this human level, the only constant is change. And it has been my experience that spirit, or the great creator, or consciousness seems to be a constant throughout everything. And when I have a little practice where I like to ground myself to the core of the earth and allow the earth's energy to rise up into my being, then send my energy out through the crown of my head to the sun and then the center of our galaxy, and allow that energy to come back in and swirl through and mix together. And in that space, I feel there's a constance. But on the human level, I kind of see the top of the earth that we're living on as this like effervescence. And we see it as like, oh, this is a rock over here, or this is a tree. And it's
this is China, this is Australia.
And they're all so exact with their dimensions and things. But if I take on like the earth's perspective, or the galaxy's perspective of time, this is just moving so quickly. Like, life is just turning over and over, and things are eating each other and decomposing, which is really just another form of being eaten. And all of those trophic scales are moving so fast that it looks just like, to me, the fizz coming off of like a soda, where it's just like pop, 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 pop. And you're like, oh, if you were to identify with one of those little bubbles who goes up and then either pops and parts of you drop down and other parts of you go up, that's what living on the surface of the earth kind of feels like to me. This really fast moving, all of these lives coming in and out quicker than you can imagine them. And
you lost me at the bubbles.
Oh, great.
So
that's when you know the journey really begins, is when you're lost. Otherwise, you're just walking someone else's path for a bit, right?
But I do get the idea of, like, things being very fast and moving quickly, and also, like, really embracing that we are having short lives in a really long life period that's happening around us, which is the earths, which is the trees, which is, the stones or rocks have very, very long life periods.
Oh, yeah.
And so what we see as stable is just kind of a blink in the eye. And so all of this change that is happening, the more we can adapt to it, the more we can not just adapt but thrive, find our place within this this space, this journey, and find our own source connections, our own impulses to, like, what we're supposed to be doing here, so that we can really step up and live part of the add to the part of the jigsaw that's going on out here, fill in the pieces, so that the human existence, we can help with its expansion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the fun with being in the garden, or being in a place of cultivation, is engaging with that more. Oftentimes, like, there's Shinrin-yoku, which is forest bathing, that comes from Japan.
Yeah, I love that
idea. People just walking in the forest and enjoying all of the different essences that the trees are putting off that are calming their cortisol levels in their bodies, so they're reducing their stress through that. And a lot of these nature-based practices don't have us really engaging with nature. They just have us kind of enjoying it. And I find that a lot of people's lives are so removed from the earth that that's a great first step. Just get out there and get in it. But then as we drop in, like, I brush my teeth most days, and I take a shower and make sure my body is cared for. And the earth is really an extension of our body. And so by getting my hands into the soil, it does all that same stuff that going for a walk in the forest would do, but it also builds my intimate awareness with the particular soil that I'm cultivating and the plants that go into that and those life forms and maybe the birds that are coming in or the bees and hummingbirds that are pollinating things. And that whole awareness of, oh, it takes all of these different organisms in concert for all of this beauty to come forward. And in the forest, you might not notice it because you're only there walking through it for a moment. But in your own personal garden space, even if it's just on the balcony of your apartment, those things will start to happen, and then your awareness kicks in, and then you're actually engaging with more of the life that's around you, which I feel is part of our natural state of being that we've gotten slightly removed from. And we have the opportunity at any moment in time to re-engage that and bring ourselves back to that grounded point of literally like hands and feet in some form of soil. And that helps to discharge any of the positive ions that have accumulated on us by wearing shoes and not touching the earth so much of the time.
I love that. And I love that is so you're so aware of all of this. What do you have like any tips or ideas for people who find themselves trapped in their minds? Because often we can go out to these places and then we can just be repeating our thoughts and being caught up in all the things we have to do and all the things that are going on in our lives. Is there any advice you have for them?
Well, I find that picking some simple task, like writing, whether it's in a journal, it doesn't even have to be journal style writing, just to allow yourself to like get some creativity flowing. Maybe you like drawing stuff. Like I draw like a third grader. It's terrible. But I still like to do it every now and then just because it relaxes my need to be perfect, my need to be performing a particular task. And some people it's cooking. It doesn't really matter what the task is, just to find some task in your life that you can turn off a screen and be engaged with actually creating something. And let it suck. Let it suck so bad that you don't ever want to show it to anybody. Because
I love that.
That's just a judgment, and the judgments get in the way.
Yeah, they do.
And that will stop you from doing everything. And so to like be able to push past your sucking at something, to just engage in some form. And, you know, sometimes that could be just going outside and just sitting outside and just witnessing the world around you and allowing it to be enough. Because so much we want like a result from what we're doing. Like I wrote this book, for instance. I didn't start writing a book. I started being like, I'm working too much and I'm totally engaged as a father, and so I don't actually have any time for myself. And my family has a dancing practice that we try to do at least twice a month, but hopefully weekly. And I was just dying for lack of creativity in my world. And I decided I'm going to take the moment where I'm wiping off my sweat at the dance to write a little bit. And in those few minutes of writing, I started feeling like, oh, here's that creative energy, that life-giving force, you know. And then this past year, I was about to turn 40, and I was looking at my life, and I was like, I know I've done a lot of different things, and I've been assistants to different people, but I feel like I haven't done anything. And I have zero to show for it. And I looked at my writings one day and I was just like, you know, with self-publishing abilities now, I can actually make a book. And I decided, okay, by the end of the year, I'm going to produce this book. And that, again, was re-engaging my little practice of I'm doing my sucky writings here. And I didn't put the sucky ones into the book. I chose the ones I really liked.
Sure.
But it became this new process of, oh, I have to like push past I'm looking at a screen now. Because to self-publish, you have to look at a computer screen.
Oh, and you don't usually.
I try not to spend much time on the computers.
Gotcha.
And
yeah, well, I love this because you're, you know, I think sometimes when people think about authors or, you know, completed projects, oh, look, it's done. It looks effortless. Right? And so, no, there's parts that, here, we're going to flip the page so you can hear it. There's always a process, and there's always, it's almost like, you know, it's like the process of coming up against our all the parts in ourselves that have kept these things from happening. It's like, especially when we do it the first time,
Yes.
it's like there's so many things that can come up, and there it's all like, you're not good enough. Oh, that's just the way it is.
100%.
And so, yeah, so fabulous. So you managed, or you not just managed, but thrived, and worked past these things.
Yes. And, anyone can do that. And the wonderful thing is, like, you don't even have to order 100 books. It's like, if you've only got, like, $50 to publish a couple books, go ahead and do that. Like, and then you can either give them to people that you like, or, I'm selling mine, making a few dollars here and there. It feels great. And then if someone actually likes it and they tell me that, I'm like, whoa, that's kind of like confirmation that it wasn't just satisfying for my own self in the process of writing it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. I wonder if we can talk a little bit more about the state of the planet and your perspective of it.
Sure.
Because I really enjoy the idea of, maybe this is all happening for a larger reason.
I kind of look at it from the perspective of, there are those individuals who feel that Earth is here to do whatever we want with it. Like, you go out and you buy a piece of land, you can basically do whatever you want to the land, and it doesn't have consequence.
Or consciousness.
And then there are those people who feel that the Earth is a living being who has the same rights as a person does, and that you can't just go and do whatever you want to a piece of land. You have to really check in with it and make sure that whatever you're going to be doing there is in right relation to it. And so there's these two different paradigms that I see playing out.
Right.
And the fact that there's even conversation that's happening around that these days is really makes me feel so much better about the trajectory that the world can go.
Well, what people don't understand is that if they were in cooperation with the land itself, that they would actually have much better produce that is that blossoms on it, and in fact they'd have they'd start generating that magical energy on that property, because the elemental world, which is the elemental spirits who look after all the plants and everything, that they would feel respected.
Absolutely.
And they would feel loved. I know this is really out here, but I know we can get away with this on Salt Spring Radio. but they feel loved, and they feel like they're considered, and so they will cooperate with you, co-create. Especially when you kind of bow down to them and say, what would you like for this space? What would you like for this property? What's your vision? Because there already is templates out there.
Yes.
That these beings are actually holding templates. And the more we can attune to that, and, maybe getting in touch with Reed or somebody like that who can help, tune in with that. I don't know if that's part of your gig.
It certainly can be.
Yeah. So being able to tune in and being able to work with the land like that will bring a lot more exquisite energy into your space.
Certainly. And if people are worried that that might all sound a bit woo-woo for them, I want to let them know there's a wonderful book called The Secret Life of Plants that was written a while back that has some prestige to it. And those same authors came out with another book called The Secret Life of Nature. And they get into all of these different devas of the plants and of the sea and of the sky, and they basically visit the Anthroposophical Society, which is a society that Rudolf Steiner was a part of, then he kind of broke off from there. And they have practices to develop beyond our five senses to witness these beings and communicate with them so that we can be in a constant relationship. And places like Findhorn over in Scotland are set up in the same kind of way. And so there's actually, the precedent seems to be growing. And like from Findhorn, people are spreading out and starting their own sister community sort of places that listen to the landscape and to the plants and communicate and make offerings even. Over in Iceland, I guess they have a branch of their government, which is for like the fairies and the elves, so that when they're going to go put in a highway, for instance, they send this crew out first to make sure that there's no like
resistance
or places of importance to the elves and fairies.
Good point.
And I guess that they found this giant rock 'cause they wanted to put in a highway.
Yeah.
And it's like a huge rock, and it was like, I think it was a fairy cathedral or an elf cathedral, I don't remember exactly. They're like, it's going to cost us like a couple $1 million or something to move this giant rock. They're like, well, that's what the fairies and elves said we have to do if we want the highway to go through here. And so they spent the money, is what I heard,
That's powerful.
to actually move it over and give it a place and be respectful in that way.
Well, that's really showing the new paradigm that's we're being shifted into.
Absolutely.
Is that consciousness, that awareness of nature. I mean, call it what you like. It's fairies and elves, elementals, maybe it's just nature spirit. The more we can connect with that and have respect for Mother Earth, have respect for that energy, the more that we're going to be able to live in communion, live like better lives. Now, I just have one more question for you.
Okay.
Do you talk about mushrooms too?
Sometimes.
Okay, we're going to have you back
Great.
another time. But we're out of time now. So, Reed, if people want to get a hold of you, how would they do it?
You can go to my website, which is bendingreeds.com.
I love that.
Yeah.
Bending Reed. It's REED.
That's right. And that's the easiest way. There's a email that can be sent from there directly to me. I get all that stuff. If you're on island here or you're coming by, I'll be doing a book reading on May 7th at the Salt Spring Library at 7 o'clock.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
Get out there, everyone. You've got your questions for him now, hey?
I can't wait. I love a good question.
Yeah. And you fly with it.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Reed, for being on the show.
Oh, it's been such a delight, Gaianna.
Oh, it's such a pleasure, too, to really dive into all this stuff. I love this type of, this depth, this quality of depth of going into the elementals and fairies, because that's also where I come from.
Brilliant. I could see that.
Oops, I just revealed a deep part of myself.
That's why people tune in.
That's why they tune in. There was actually a whole period of time where I was clearing down people's properties. And it was helping. There's techniques from Finhorn that I learned.
Oh, yes.
And so there's ways of clearing down anything that's being built up over time from humans or from any experiences that happen on the property, so that the energy of the land can start coming back into harmony.
Wonderful.
So beautiful. So anyway, there we go.
Aloha.
Aloha. Thank you for taking these stories in. I hope they inspire you to walk to the beat of your own drum and start to tickle your curiosity into the possibility of enjoying a bright and beautiful future. May these stories inspire us all to see a greater vision of what's possible for the world. If you like this story and want to hear more, then Google Gulf Island Community Radio and listen live on your computer every Friday at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. You can find out more about me, Gaianna, at gaiannasophia.com. That's spelled GaiannaSophia.com, where I've got links to my YouTube channels, and you get to see me live, and the Conscious Planet Network Facebook page, where you can tune in and listen to the recordings of this show online. And special thanks to Kilo Kaz for letting us use their song Happy in the Meadow for our broadcast. Thanks for listening to the Conscious Planet Network, broadcasting to you from the Gulf Island Community Radio. See you next time.